So assuming this GEX level that we're looking at comes to the fore, if you enter, what would your stop and risk management look like when we're sitting around these key
areas?
Yes.
So if you notice how the GEX levels are in crude oil, they're all on like sort of quarter, half, and round numbers. So I try to avoid putting my stops at the round numbers. So for example, this GEX 4 is 68.50. So one thing I won't be doing is putting a stop at 68.50, because that's just asking for it. You want to be smacked in the face. So I try to teach everybody to avoid those round numbers. So for me, the most ideal setup here would be if we actually overshoot a little bit, and then I manage to get a stop somewhere sub 68.30. And then if that doesn't work out, well, we have this structure that you can see here. So it's 68.20, well, again, 68.25. My stop would need to go below that. So again, depending on how the price behaves, I will still try to get my stop away from those levels. So in a way, I'm still looking at these lines as a zone. They're not singular price levels to me. They're still a zone. And I think that's something to take away from any approach. Trading is not an exact science, as we all know, so we can't necessarily pinpoint everything to the tick. And crude oil is a bit slippery, right? So we know that it likes to overshoot levels, and that has to be accounted for in the approach. But basically, the main thing, the main takeaway is not to put your stops exactly where the GEX level is. Now, if we move away too far from it, I will probably just let it go. Because anytime something moves away more than 10, 15, 20 ticks away from the level that I'm actually referencing, that's a bad idea, right? Because you're too far away. So now we can always have the risk of going back to the level, and then you have a paper cut, even if it's not a full stop, and you're just like, well, why did I do that? So some critical thinking before entering a trade is always useful, and that would be my approach for crude oil. Now, I know that round numbers are pretty big in equities as well. But, you have things like NQ. I know, Anne-Marie, you trade NQ a lot. Let me ask you a question. How would you approach something similar in NQ?
For me, when I pop into these levels, my first thought is usually, is this a region that might give me future support or future resistance based on what the framework looked like? So in that same chart, because we tested the low in the double bottoming formation and then broke up and made a new high within that range, going all the way up into that upper edge, exactly, it tells me that there's a potential for a megaphone that might be building. And that level down there at the GEX, although it's there, it's a little bit squishy. And so my thought and my goal is usually I'm going to let it collapse through that number. And then if there's buying pressure underneath it, I'm going to watch for a reversal formation. And so a lot of times 30 minutes feels like a really long time to wait for a reversal formation, because for me, it's got to get a candle that fails to head lower, a candle that tests resistance, which might be the same candle, but then at least another candle that pulls back and holds a higher low. And so sometimes I will hop to the 15-minute formation and say, all right, if this collapses here, let's see how it holds from that framework. And then once it recovers the GEX line, I'm going to take the trade. And for the reversal formation, I would do the same thing. Is it breaking past it? No, I see a lot of topping wicks. It makes me a little nervous. So I will wait for it to fail. And you can see I give up a lot of profit in that space. Your trade executed because you saw that potential for that failed auction event. And so you got in sooner because everything else was setting up on those time frames. For me, unless I collapsed to a tighter time frame, I would have to wait for that great big down candle and then the first bounce higher that doesn't break the GEX, and then I can rotate into it. And I would go small size because that high volume node right in there would give me a little bit of angst, right? And so I would add to the position once it collapsed through the range. That's really what I do.